In a world driven by breaking news, instant reactions, and endless speculation, very few people attempt something more difficult, stepping back and asking a deeper question. What if the future isn't random? What if it follows patterns we've seen before? That is the foundation behind the work of Jiang Xueqin, a relatively unknown academic who, until recently, operated quietly on the edges of public attention. But that changed, because before it became widely accepted, before media narratives began to shift, he made a prediction that many dismissed at the time.
In this class, this semester, I'm making three big predictions, right? First is that Trump will win in November. Second is the United States will go to war against Iran. And the third big prediction is that the United States will lose this war, which will forever change the global order.
At first, his prediction didn't stand out. The internet is full of bold claims, speculative theories, and confident voices. Most of them fade away as quickly as they appear, and for a while, it seemed like his would too. But then something unusual happened. Reality began to move, slowly, then noticeably, in the direction he had described. Political momentum shifted, public discourse evolved. Events that once seemed unlikely started to feel possible, and that's when people went back. They revisited his videos, rewatched his explanations, and began asking a simple but powerful question. If he saw that coming, what else did he see? Unlike traditional analysts who focus on current events, statements from officials, or short-term developments, Jiang Xueqin approaches the world differently. He studies patterns, not just political patterns, but human ones. How societies behave under pressure, how powerful nations respond to uncertainty, how conflicts evolve over time. His method, often described as predictive history, is built on the idea that while specific events may be unpredictable, the structure behind them is not. History, in this sense, doesn't repeat itself exactly, but it rhymes. And those rhymes, if recognized early, can point toward possible futures. But it wasn't his political predictions that truly captured global attention. It was what came next. In a series of discussions and analyses, he began outlining a scenario that many considered far more serious and far more controversial: a potential conflict between the United States and Iran. At first, this didn't sound particularly unusual. Tensions between the two countries have existed for decades, fluctuating between diplomatic strain and open hostility. But his argument went further. He didn't just suggest that conflict was possible. He suggested that, in such a conflict, the outcome might not be what most people expect. According to Jiang Xueqin, a war between the United States and Iran would not resemble traditional large-scale wars, where military strength alone determines the outcome. Instead, it would follow a different logic, one that has played out repeatedly throughout history. And in that kind of scenario, he argues, the United States could face serious challenges, even the possibility of strategic failure. This claim is what transformed his work from niche analysis into viral discussion, because it directly challenges a deeply held assumption that superior military power guarantees victory. To understand his argument, it's important to break it down into its core ideas. Asymmetric warfare. At the center of his theory is the concept of asymmetric conflict. In simple terms, this means that weaker powers do not fight stronger ones on equal terms. Instead of direct confrontation, they rely on strategies that avoid head-on battle. They stretch conflicts over time. They operate through indirect channels. They exploit the vulnerabilities of stronger opponents. In this framework, victory is not about overwhelming force. It's about endurance. History provides multiple examples where powerful nations struggled, not because they lacked strength, but because they were drawn into long, complex conflicts that drained resources and public support. Another key element of his argument focuses on the economic impact of war. Modern conflicts extend far beyond the battlefield. They affect global energy markets, international trade routes, financial systems. A prolonged conflict can create instability that reaches far beyond the countries directly involved. Even a powerful nation can experience significant pressure if a conflict disrupts its economic balance over time. In this sense, war becomes less about decisive victories and more about long-term sustainability. Perhaps the most important idea in his analysis is patience. According to this perspective, the outcome of a conflict is not determined by who strikes first or who appears stronger at the beginning. It is determined by who can sustain pressure the longest. A nation that can endure economic strain, maintain internal stability, and continue operating under prolonged stress gains a strategic advantage, even if it appears weaker at first. This shifts the definition of winning. Victory becomes less visible, less immediate, and far more complex. Despite the growing attention, it is important to approach these ideas with caution. Jiang Xueqin is not a prophet. He does not claim certainty, and his methods, while compelling, are not universally accepted. Critics argue that global politics is too complex to reduce to patterns. Historical comparisons can be selective. Predictions can appear accurate in hindsight. Others, however, believe that dismissing such analysis entirely would be a mistake, because history has often shown that major shifts are preceded by warning signs, patterns that are visible but not widely recognized at the time. Beyond the accuracy of any single prediction, there is another dimension to consider: the influence of belief. Predictions do not exist in isolation. Once they enter public discourse, they begin to shape how people think, react, and prepare. Investors may adjust their strategy. Governments may reconsider their position. Individuals may change their expectations of the future. In this way, predictions can become part of the reality they attempt to describe, not because they are guaranteed to be true, but because they affect behavior. What began as a relatively obscure analytical approach has now become part of a much larger conversation. A conversation about uncertainty, about power, about the limits of prediction, and about whether the patterns of the past can truly guide us through the complexities of the present. Whether Jiang Xueqin is ultimately right or wrong remains to be seen, but one thing is clear: more people are listening now than before, and in a world shaped by perception as much as reality, that alone can make a difference. The story of Jiang Xueqin is not just about one man's prediction. It is about a broader idea that the future may not be as unpredictable as it seems, but also not as controllable as we would like. Somewhere between pattern and chaos, between insight and uncertainty, lies the space where these predictions exist.